The day following my graduation, a bombshell dropped. My mom and her boyfriend declared that, now an adult, I needed to find my own place. This unexpected decree marked a seismic shift in our relationship, triggered by the arrival of her boyfriend. Despite my earnest attempts to make a favorable impression, her boyfriend seemed to harbor a deep-seated resentment towards me from the outset. He wielded his influence to persuade my mom to impose rent on me despite his own unemployment and reliance on her financial support. He brazenly invaded my privacy, rifling through my possessions and utilizing them without consent. Adding insult to injury, he irreparably damaged my laptop after misusing it. My mom, swayed by her affections for him, consistently took his side, even in the face of my justified complaints about his behavior. When she ultimately chose to side with him and evict me, I found myself suddenly thrust into homelessness. I relied on the kindness of friends, couch surfing until their patience wore thin, and at times, resorting to sleeping rough outdoors. Fortunately, through networking, I secured a second job and diligently saved up enough to secure a new place. After months of instability, I finally found solace in my newfound independence when I moved into my own place at the dawn of a new month. Recently, my mom's boyfriend reached out to me with startling news. My mom had suffered a stroke. He attempted to leverage guilt to coerce me into returning home to care for her while he pursued a job opportunity elsewhere. However, I steadfastly declined his entreaty, citing my demanding schedule and responsibilities. Amidst the tumult, I neglected to block them in the heat of the moment, clinging to a faint hope that my mom might experience a change of heart. Regrettably, that prospect remained elusive until now. He must take her along when he relocates for his promising new job. You're not at fault. Your mother has made it clear where her priorities lie, and where yours should align. There's no need for you to harbor guilt. Her stroke doesn't absolve her of the responsibility to ensure the well-being of her child before banking on a relationship. It's a sorrowful lesson for a young person. Parents are expected to offer greater support. I wouldn't extend a helping hand to her. While I advise against returning, it's evident she wouldn't do the same for you. Treating someone like family requires reciprocation, and your mother's actions haven't shown that reciprocity. Her boyfriend saw the situation as nearly perfect, with the only flaw being you. Consequently, he convinced your mother to remove you from the equation. Now, with your mother's health declining, his ideal scenario has crumbled, and he's seeking to shift the burden onto someone else. Your mother is reaping the consequences of her actions, which have been reprehensible on numerous occasions. It's no surprise he'll move on to his next victim, leaving your mother behind. Despite care, this man will simply vanish, leaving her abandoned. His sudden job opportunity conveniently coincides with leaving her behind. It's hard to argue that she doesn't deserve this outcome. I, a 34-year-old male, work in a physically demanding field alongside colleagues who are all in good shape, with little body diversity. My wife, aged 32, is overweight. However, she has always been so, even when we were dating and got married. She's aware of her weight but embraces herself as she is, and I find her beautiful. I am content with our relationship. If my wife decides to lose weight, I'm genuinely happy for her. However, even if she chooses to remain as she is, I still hold her as the epitome of beauty. This sentiment became a point of contention when Julia, a 28-year-old coworker, initiated a conversation about body image. She lamented feeling too heavy to be deserving of love, perpetuating the harmful notion that individuals of larger sizes are unworthy of affection. Julia, who is not what one would classify as overweight, engaged in rigorous exercise routines and maintained a relatively modest diet. Attempting to dispel her misconceptions, I referenced my wife's figure, which she misconstrued as an insult. Julia adamantly objected to my description of my wife, asserting that I was degrading her. In her view, my wife was a vision of beauty characterized by curves rather than what she deemed as a pejorative term, fat. However, my wife, Carol, does not align with the societal preference for the term curvy. She perceives it as a euphemism, obscuring the reality of her body size. I relayed Carol's perspective to Julia, which only seemed to exacerbate her irritation. She retaliated by threatening to inform my wife of my comments, immediately initiating a message on Instagram to carry out her threat. To preclude any misunderstanding, I promptly called my wife, ensuring Julia bore witness to our conversation. Carol, with her characteristic wit and confidence, rejected the label of curvy, affirming her self-identification as fat and beautiful. Satisfied with her response, I expressed my affection and concluded the call. Julia's reaction was unexpected and extreme. She accused me of coercing my wife into accepting the term fat to maintain control over her and prevent her from leaving. Her assertion that no rational woman would tolerate such language from her husband left me bewildered. Subsequently, I received a notification from HR requesting a meeting, indicating a potential escalation of the situation. While I remain uncertain of the grounds for Julia's grievance, the workplace atmosphere has become palpably strained. Julia's demeanor toward me has grown increasingly hostile, fostering an uncomfortable environment. Reflecting on the events, I question whether my characterization of my wife as fat was indeed inappropriate. Yet, I fail to comprehend how Julia's involvement in my personal affairs merits HR intervention. You're absolutely not at fault in this situation, and your wife truly shines with her remarkable qualities. Julia's attempt at seeking validation didn't quite yield the results she anticipated. Dealing with HR may pose some challenges, but it's essential to recognize that being labeled as fat isn't legally protected in most areas, and you didn't even direct that term toward Julia. Additionally, your wife isn't a coworker, so Julia's concerns seem unfounded in that regard. While I'm not a legal expert, there may be grounds for a wrongful termination suit if matters were to escalate to that extent. Considering Julia's role in fostering a toxic work environment, lodging a formal complaint against her might be a necessary step to address the underlying issues. It's understandable to find repetitive negative remarks draining, especially when they center around self-deprecating comments like "I'm so ugly." While offering blunt responses can sometimes snap individuals out of this pattern, it's also crucial to acknowledge the emotional toll such remarks can take. Julia's behavior appears rooted in insecurity rather than any genuine concern about body image. Her struggles with maintaining relationships likely stem more from her volatile personality than any physical attributes. Shifting gears to family dynamics, your experience with your sister stepping into a parental role presents a unique situation. While some may interpret your mother's actions as abandonment, others may understand the extenuating circumstances surrounding her decisions. However, your wife's perspective is understandably different, as she perceives your mother's actions as neglecting her parental responsibilities, which understandably causes her distress. When my mom visits, tensions often arise because she tends to offer advice on parenting, which irks my wife. She firmly believes that my mom should stick to her own lane, especially considering she didn't raise her own children. While I agree with the notion of maintaining boundaries, dismissing my mom's role in raising us is unjust. Despite not living with us or having overnight stays, she was still very much present in our lives. My wife's upbringing was far from ideal, being the oldest of 6 siblings. She essentially took on a parental role from a young age. Contrastingly, I come from a family where I am the youngest of 4. Her resentment towards her own mother stems from feeling robbed of her childhood, having to shoulder immense responsibilities from a young age, including working to support her family at just 15. She harbors particular animosity towards my mother, viewing her actions as worse than her own mother's despite the ongoing tensions with her. My mother's decision to leave me in the care of my sister for 2 years, even though she was still present in our lives, is a point of contention. Meanwhile, my wife's mother, despite her demands for her to contribute financially and help raise her siblings, was physically present in the household. Despite her resentment towards her own mother, my wife feels sorry for my sister, whose marriage suffered due to my mom's presence. My sister's marriage fell apart shortly after my mom moved in, as her husband hadn't signed up to raise children so soon after getting married. The recent argument stemmed from a request I made to my wife, asking if her mom could take care of the kids for a week or 2 to give us a break. Lately, the kids have been quite a handful, and I felt we all could benefit from some time apart. However, my wife adamantly refused, arguing that as parents, we shouldn't pawn off our responsibilities onto others. I tried to explain that a break would benefit all of us, not just me, but the conversation ended with her insisting that I listen to her perspective. I understand that your mother's behavior may have influenced your perception of what constitutes normalcy in child rearing practices. However, It's important to acknowledge that entrusting someone else to care for your children for extended periods isn't necessarily the norm. Therefore, I won't be asking my mom to take on such a responsibility solely to alleviate your burden in dealing with the kids. The exchange between you and your wife, where tensions escalated to the point where you snapped and told her to stop discussing your mom, is understandable given the circumstances. Yet, it's crucial to address conflicts constructively and without resorting to harsh language. While your reaction to your wife's complaints about your mom may not have been entirely unjustified, it's worth noting that she tends to bring up these grievances primarily when your mom tries to intervene in parenting matters or when you suggest the kids spend time at her mom's place. Despite your efforts to intervene and ask your mom to respect your parenting decisions, your wife appears to feel overwhelmed, particularly in light of your mom's increased involvement and overbearing parenting tips following the birth of your baby. Your wife's insistence on therapy for you may stem from her concern that you may be overlooking or downplaying your mom's past actions and their impact. She perceives this as affecting your ability to objectively evaluate your mom's behavior, especially when you defend her actions, such as her advocacy for the cry it out method. Despite your efforts to establish boundaries with your mom, your wife seems to feel that you're still placing her on a pedestal. It's evident that your wife holds strong feelings on this matter, as she views your sister as more deserving of praise and respect than your mother. While you may have a deep affection for your mom and admire her qualities, it's essential to consider and validate your wife's perspective. I walked into church the other day with my 4 teenagers in tow, only to find myself on the receiving end of unsolicited parenting advice from some fellow dads. One of them, whose own child is currently in rehab for the 4th time while another is expecting her second baby at the tender age of 19, saw fit to offer me his wisdom. I promptly rebuffed his attempts, telling him in no uncertain terms to mind his own business. It's a sentiment that resonates with how your wife feels when your mom decides to dispense her own parenting advice. It's clear that tensions are running high, and in the heat of the moment, emotions can cloud judgment. However, it's important to address the underlying issues rather than resorting to name-calling. While the situation may be frustrating, it's essential to communicate respectfully and work towards finding a resolution that respects everyone's feelings and perspectives. Your wife's frustration is understandable, especially when it feels like both you and your mom are disregarding her boundaries. Despite being repeatedly told to refrain from giving unsolicited advice, your mom persists, which understandably adds to your wife's stress, particularly in her exhausted postpartum state. It's worth reflecting on your wife's perspective, as she may have a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play, having raised 2 children herself. Her frustration likely stems from feeling unheard and disrespected, especially when your mom continues to overstep despite being asked to refrain from doing so. Finding a way to address these issues calmly and constructively is key to fostering a healthy and harmonious family dynamic. The woman who actually raised their siblings, along with their sister, supported wife, highlighting the validity of her standpoint. This individual seems to lack any substantial grounds for his complaints. Over the past month, my daughter has been enduring severe bullying at grammar school, reaching a point where she expressed a reluctance to attend classes. While the school has made some efforts to address the issue, the lack of cooperation from the bully's mother has exacerbated the situation. In my 2 conversations with her about the matter, she displayed extreme hostility, resorting to aggressive language and behavior, leaving me deeply unsettled. For a long time, I had believed that the bully's father was absent from his life, either due to being non-existent or deceased. The school records only listed his mother's name and contact information, and I had never encountered his father at any school events. Moreover, my daughter had never mentioned him talking about her father. However, recent revelations have shed light on the truth. It turns out that the boy spends weekends at his father's residence in a small rural community approximately 45 minutes away. Despite my initial assumptions, his father is very much involved in his life. Upon learning this information, I sought further insights from a friend, who provided additional details about the father's background. The divorce between the parents occurred just before the boy entered kindergarten. According to a friend, the mother characterized her ex-husband as narcissistic and abusive, resulting in her obtaining a restraining order against him for several years. Additionally, she made a specific request to the school to refrain from contacting the father, emphasizing her desire to keep him out of their son's life. After some online investigation, I managed to uncover the father's identity and contact details. Fast forward to a typical day at school, where my daughter encountered yet another bullying incident. This time, the bully's actions escalated to the point where my daughter was physically shoved on the playground, necessitating a visit to the nurse's office. Frustrated and concerned for my child's well-being, I decided to take action. I reached out to the bully's father, providing him with a detailed account of the incident and the persistent bullying that my daughter had endured. During the conversation with the father, I made a conscious effort to refrain from casting any blame or making negative remarks about his ex-wife's handling of the situation. Despite my initial apprehensions, the father's response was surprisingly positive. He expressed genuine remorse for his son's behavior and assured me that appropriate measures would be taken to address the issue. His willingness to take responsibility and his commitment to ensuring that such incidents would not recur left me with a sense of relief and optimism. However, my optimism was short-lived. A few hours later, I received an unexpected and furious text message from the bully's mother. She recounted how her ex-husband reacted swiftly and aggressively after my call. He unleashed a barrage of verbal abuse on their son, hurling insults, threats, and profanities, painting a grim picture of the upcoming weekend. Subsequently, he directed his vitriol towards her, sending a barrage of abusive messages, accusing her of neglecting their son's behavior and branding her a bad mother. Furthermore, he threatened to publicly shame her on social media, exposing what he deemed her inadequacies as a parent. She expressed deep concern that his family would now join in harassing her, amplifying the distressing situation. Reflecting on her response, she asserted that I had overstepped my bounds by reaching out to her ex-husband. She concluded with a cutting remark, attributing the turmoil and anguish in her family's life to my actions. In response, I maintained my stance, asserting that her deflection of responsibility for her son's behavior was unacceptable. If she couldn't effectively address her son's misconduct, then perhaps she should consider entrusting him to someone capable of providing proper guidance and discipline. The accusation of her being a negligent mother struck a nerve, prompting a heated debate among observers. While some questioned the validity of her ex-husband's allegations, others expressed concerns about the potential danger of involving a reportedly abusive individual. Despite the contentious nature of the situation, the priority remained the protection and well-being of my daughter. It was imperative to take decisive action to ensure her safety in the face of such adversity.